We recently brought 2 new yellow lab puppies into the house, and they're about as much trouble as you would expect. We'd like to keep them contained in the part of the house that has the hard flooring. This creates the need for a gate at the top of a short set of stairs. A gate will also help contain other monsters who sometimes visit. This video will cover the making of just such a gate. So the first thing to do is to head out to the barn and go upstairs where I store my lumber. After a bit of poking around, I pick out a couple of nice straight grain pieces of ash for the balusters, some cherry for the rails and stiles, and one nice thick piece of cherry for the handrail. Like most of my projects, I first created my design using SketchUp. Our desired location has some unique challenges. We wanted the gate to sit at the top of the stairs between 2 doors that are slightly offset. So as you can see here, my design ended up with the gate at a bit of an angle to the walls, which would be a bit unusual, I suppose. From there, I exported a cut list, and then it's down to the shop to create my parts. As usual, I prepare the material by jointing one face and one edge of the rough lumber, and then planing to thickness before cutting to width. Here I'm ripping 1 by 1 inch ash that will become the balusters. Then I cut all the balusters to the same length. In this case, I'm using a panel cutter that just happened to be exactly the right length for the balusters I wanted to cut. I'm going to turn tenons on the end of the balusters using my lathe. This little center marking jig I made when I was making a whole lot of pegs for a timber frame. I first used a skew chisel to cut through the sharp corners of the square stock so that I get less splintering when I use a parting tool to turn the tenon. A simple 3/4 of an inch box end wrench makes a handy gauge to test that I've reached the desired tenon size. Once the tenons are all cut, it's time for a little sanding. Then it's back to the planer for a little bit more stock sizing. I plane some cherry boards down to 3/4 of an inch for the gate rails and stiles. Some ash gets planed down to 1/2 inch for the inside trim. And then finally that thick piece of cherry gets planed down to 1.5 inches. You can see this piece has a split near the pith of the tree, but the sides of this piece will yield a narrow strip from one side that I'll use where the gate attaches to the wall, and a wider piece that will become the handrail. I use the table saw to cut a 22-degree bevel to form the angle at which the gate meets the wall. Some parts I cut to length on the miter saw. I almost always use a marking knife rather than a pencil to ensure more accurate cuts. When I have to make a number of parts of the same length, I tend to use the crosscut sled on my table saw with a stop block to ensure repeatability. As I make each part, I refer back to the cut list that I created earlier. The 1/2 inch thick strips of ash form the inside trim for the gate and support the tenons for the balusters. I drill a 3/4 inch hole where each tenon connects to the trim. I do a quick test fit to make sure everything goes together as planned. All the parts are simply butt jointed. Then I use a chamfering bit on a trim router to soften the edges of the parts and give everything a quick sanding. The inner ash frame is assembled with glue and brad nails. For the outer cherry frame, I pre-drill with a countersink bit and then assemble with screws. That outer cherry frame is glued and screwed to the inner ash trim. So there's the completed little short sections of the gate. These are the ones that will attach to the wall. I've got these little angled pieces so I can bring the gate off at an angle to the wall. I'm going to put a little foot that it'll sit on. I made sure that I had some screws into the inner frame so that that stays nice and solid, so, you know, baby pulling on the gate won't pull that out. and it bugs me that the screw heads are exposed. I didn't have enough depth for the screws I had to really countersink them and plug them. So I think what I'll do is just put a little thin veneer strip of cherry glued to this face. So I found a nice clear grained piece of cherry in my scrap pile that's a little on the thin side. I mean, don't hate me that I have this in my scrap pile. I need a piece that's 31 5/16 by 2, and I want it about 1/4 inch thick. So for the finish on these gates, because they might be chewed upon by unruly puppies and or grandchildren, I think I'm going to use a food safe finish. I use this mineral oil, which I use for cutting boards, which I buy by the gallon from Amazon, because for end grade cutting boards, they suck up a ton of this stuff. But I happen to have it on hand, which is great here. So just a little foam brush, put it on, let it soak in, wipe it off. Super simple, very easy, and as I said, food safe. I'm going to install this little angled strip on the wall. That's what establishes the angle of the gate that's running across this kind of awkward location. Now, I do want to probably remove this at some point. Not using glue or anything. I will just screw it to the door frame. And what I'm using, I didn't bring with me. I'll be right back. What I'm using are 3 2.5 inch deck screws. Now they are going into solid maple. Hello Luna, here's the troublemaker right now. Reason for all of this. And Willow, hello Willow. Those are going into solid maple, and if they get through that, into the studs behind. So I'm not too worried about those moving once they're in there. There we go, step 1. So let's get these 2 short sections mounted to the wall now. I've mounted this one already. Let's get this one mounted on this side. And these short wall sections I've already pre-drilled. Hold them in place. Drill again for the I'll do the other side. Okay, so I installed these short sections before I built the gate. Hello, troublemaker. This is Luna, and the primary reason why we're building this gate, she's the active one. So I've got 34.5 at the bottom. At least I'm consistent, 34.5 at the top, that's good. So I'll make the gate maybe 1/4 inch smaller than that to allow for some clearance and swing. And this is why I used a food safe finish. So it's the next morning and the glue is dry, so I'll take my clamps off. I made the gate using the same basic methods that I used for little side pieces that are already installed upstairs now. So I just did that in stop motion, spare you some of the detail. The one difference is on the side pieces, I actually screwed through the outer piece to hold on the inner piece. Since this is really just a decorative strip, this time I just decided to clamp and glue it. It was easier than the screws. That said, my design sizes allow for a piece of veneer to go on the outside here anyway. So I will still do that. I'll just glue on a strip so that the gate is the right total width. It will also have the advantages from the end view of the gate. It will hide the end grain a little bit nicer, I guess. The other final thing I'll do is to prevent racking, like if with the gates hinged on one side, if you lean on it, I'll put a diagonal brace in. Might be overkill for this one, but better overkill than having a saggy gate. Okay, so we're back upstairs for a bit of a test fit. If I put the gate, the plan is to have it hinged on this side, so we'll swing this way. Hold it in place where it will be hinged. My alignment looks really good, both height and no significant twist to the gate, which can be a challenge for something like this. Now, as I said, downstairs, the gap I have allows for a veneer strip on each side. Looks like my total gap is about 1 inch. So I'll probably put about a 3/8 inch strip of veneer on each side, leave 1/4 inch clearance for gate swing. So while the glue on those veneer strips dries, now that they're clamped up, I will work on the handrail. Here is a 2.5 inch by 1.5 inch piece that I'll use for the handrail. The gate is 2 inches wide, so this will overhang by 1/4 inch. I'll put 1/4 inch, trying to decide between a chamfer and a roundover. So as it turns out, I already have a 1/4 inch roundover bit in the router table, so I will change my mind and round over the lower edge with the 1/4 inch bit. And then on the upper surface, I will use this larger 3/4 inch radius roundover bit. Now we will switch over to the 3/4 inch roundover bit. I find this Jessam router lift I have extremely handy. Fast to work with, fast blade changeover. It's a 2.25 horse Bosch router. I have router body mounted permanently in the lift, and I am quite happy with the whole setup, I have to say. Now I could stand to build a better router fence with proper dust collection. I do have a router fence that I use, a home-built thing, but the dust collection on it isn't very good. So that's a project I might tackle at some point. I make rapid adjustments with the drill and then fine adjustments with this thing. I've got it sunk fairly well below the surface. With a big router bit like this, I'd probably take a couple of passes. There you go. I'm happy with that. You notice I don't raise the router bit right quite flush, so it's not cutting tangent. You leave a bit of a crisp line here. I just like the look of that. Cleaned it up a little bit with sanding, and that'll be our handrail. The first short section needs to be scribed to fit at the end. My maximum length is about 9, so I'm going to cut off a 10-inch piece to leave me some extra. I'll scribe to fit the end at the wall, and then once that's all fit, I might take some futzing around, then I'll cut it to length. So thinking about this a bit further, this piece comes out of the wall at an angle. It's about 22 degrees. It's easier to scribe to fit if I'm at least close to the angle where it meets the wall to start, so I can fit it in a little tighter for scribing. So this will no doubt be a little bit of trial and error. The first step will be a little notch. So go along there, like this. For that, I'll go down, nibble this off of the bandsaw. Okay, with that little chunk cut away, we're getting a little closer. Yeah, pretty close actually. Okay, with that cut and fit to my reasonable satisfaction, I will hold it in place and mark the underside with a knife. And we can apply some of our paraffin oil food safe finish. So I forgot to record it initially, but looking at it from below, I did this in 2 stages. A long drill for the length of the bit, and then just a shorter one for countersink. So I'm using some fairly long screws here. I didn't have a long enough drill and countersink bit. That feels pretty good actually. And I'll do the same thing here. Here we go, nice and solid. Next we'll install a simple little gate latch here. Leave it so it's got room to swing all the way up. Mark where we want to drill. All right, we're into the home stretch here. Take these clamps off. Little final sanding, finish. I've got some non-mortising hinges. Very simple, just screw them on. And we will get this gate up and finished. right up against the railing. There you go. All right, she's really good.
That's pretty good.
Here, go. There we go. So there were a couple of final touches that happened off camera. One, I replaced the baluster on the far left that was whiter than all the other ones because it was a piece of sapwood. Everything else was kind of heartwood. I put in two little stops. One at the top to prevent you from pushing the gate past. One at the bottom serves the same purpose, sort of stops the gate at the bottom. Also has a bit of a ramp that provides some support if you lean on the gate. And then finally, this stop serves two purposes. It prevents the pantry door from bumping into the gate. And then finally, there's a little rubber bumper. Oop, look out you. Little rubber bumper on this side where the gate bumps into the railing. That's it. That is the finished puppy / baby gate. And if you made it this far, thanks for watching.